The crankbait can be your best friend in the summer. The crankbait covers a lot of water, and it also can be fished in many different depths, from the shallow to the deep range. That will help you find and catch bass in the summer. And today in this video on Bass Fishing Declassified, Matt Steffen, Randy Blockett, and myself are going to give you some tips to help you go out and catch more fish this summer on a crankbait.
One of my favorite techniques for fishing northern lakes during the summer months is deep cranking weed lines, outside weed lines. If you've got a good, clean outside weed line, a crankbait is one of the best ways to create a reaction strike and quickly cover those weed lines to allow you to find those big schools of fish. It is truly something that is a very, very good technique, and it also catches big fish. So I know a lot of you are thinking, well, why would you throw a crankbait on a weed line? You're probably going to have a lot of grass. You're right, you do end up with a lot of casts that result in getting stuck in the weeds and getting grass balled up on your crankbait. But there's a couple of key points here. The first is, if you find a good, deep, clean weed line, you actually want to make some contact with the grass. You want to snap it out of the grass, which creates a lot of good reaction strikes. So if you're fishing a good, solid weed line, that's a nice, clean weed line with green grass, you can actually fish them very effectively with a crankbait. Now, I will say a lot of the weed lines are generally going to be in that 10 to 14 foot range, so you're not looking for an extremely deep diving crankbait. You're looking for something like this guy right here. This is a Berkley Dredger 14.5, one of my absolute favorites for fishing those deep weed lines. And I want to point out too, you're not necessarily fishing it to make contact with the bottom. You're looking to make contact with the sides of the grass. And ideally, what you're looking for are irregularities in that grass line. So maybe it's a small point in grass, maybe it's an indentation, maybe it's where you get a little bit sparser section of grass, or where you have some rock that butts up to a grass line. The point is, you're looking for those little irregularities to deflect your crankbait off of. And that can very much be the grass as well. So if you're fishing, say, milfoil in 14 foot of water, you can snap these through really well. But I do want to point out a couple of things. You want a crankbait that will dive down relatively quickly, and you want a crankbait that will actually snap out of that grass. Some crankbaits ball up good in the grass and don't rip out. Others do a very good job of cutting through that grass and coming out. That's one of the reasons why I really like the Dredger. The Dredger does a really good job at diving straight down, getting you into that strike zone. And then when you clip the grass and give it a nice hard snap, you can rip it through the grass really well. So that's one part of the equation. The other part is your rod and reel setup. So I use a custom built MHX CB907 rod. It's a 7.5 foot blended rod. Now this is probably a little bit stronger than what I would generally throw with, say, a Dredger 14.5. But I want a little heavier crankbait rod because I want a stiffer midsection. I want something that will really allow me to rip that out of the grass to create that reactionary strike. So I would generally, if I was fishing rock, say throw this on a 6 power rod. I go up to a 7 power blended rod when I'm fishing around grass because I want that extra backbone. But I want to stay with a crankbait or a blended series rod so that I still have that soft tip that allows the fish to get it. Because a lot of times you are getting reactionary strikes, which means those fish are swapping at the bait, they're tail slapping it, and you end up not always getting the bait fully in the fish's mouth. So you need a softer tip for that. The other thing I'm going to point out here that is a little bit unusual for crankbait fishing is my gear ratio on the reel. Generally speaking, most people like a slower gear ratio reel when using crankbaits. I stick with an 8.1 or an 8.0 to 1 gear ratio reel, a higher speed retrieve reel, because I can snap it out of the grass better, meaning I can slowly work my bait down into the strike zone, but at some point I'm going to make contact with that grass. And when I do that, I have a better chance at ripping it out of the grass if I give a rod a good snap and I take up line at the same time. It creates that better explosion out of the grass, which results in it ripping free better. So I kind of go with untraditional crankbait gear in this case. From a line standpoint, I'm going to be throwing 15-pound fluorocarbon, straight fluorocarbon, no braid. something that's got to be strong enough to snap out of the grass and withhold a full day's worth of snapping out of the grass. And again, that's a little bit different for me. Generally, when I'm cranking, I'm throwing 10 or 12 pound tests. But in this case, I'm trying to upsize everything that I'm doing to make sure that I can thoroughly rip this through some of those irregularities on the grass line. Truly one of the best ways to catch them in the North Country on natural lakes during the summer.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Bass Fishing Declassified, and really appreciate you guys checking today's video out. Got a good one for you today. We're going to be talking about summer crankbait fishing. I'm going to talk about my 2 favorite ways to fish crankbaits in the summer months, so we'll get into it here. First of all, we got deep crankbaits and shallow crankbaits. So it's like one extreme to the other, and both of them work really good all summer long. So we'll talk about deep cranking first and shallow cranking. So anyway, deep cranking, guys, in the month of June, early July, you cannot beat a deep crank. My favorite is a Megabass Deep 6 crankbait here. I use it in a variety of colors, depending upon the water clarity. If the water is, over 3.5, 4 foot visibility, I like some type of a shad pattern. If it's under that, I usually use some type of a perch pattern with a chartreuse side. But guys, the month of June, I probably caught more big fish on deep crankbaits in the month of June than any other month out there, because what they do in the places you want to look for is get out on those main lake flat points. If you can find main lake flat points, or maybe even secondary flat points back in the creeks, get out there on the point ends of sides, get on that break and try to crank sort of that 8 to 15 foot range. And the Megabass Deep 6 will knock that down. I usually use it like on 12 pound test Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon line, Megabass launcher rod, which is a 7 foot 11 inch, sort of a composite rod, making long casts, trying to target those point ends and sides just along those breaks. And you'll find in June, the fish like to get on breaks. They like to get on drop-offs. They like to get on hard places. It doesn't matter if it's a sharp drop or a gradual drop. Just look for those drop-offs on the points with the deep crankbait. Now on the other end of the spectrum, shallow cranking, guys, is also highly productive if you don't like fishing deep. And what I do is I'll take the Megabass 2.0 S crank here. This is a square bill crankbait, the larger size, and I'm looking for off-colored water. So most of the time I'm going to the back ends of the creeks, I'm going into the upper river arms of any lake that I'm fishing, and I'm cranking whatever cover's available. If there's shallow rock, I'm cranking rock. If there's laydowns or stumps, I'm cranking that. If there's shallow grass, I'm cranking along the grass edges. This is a really good technique, especially later in the summer when that water gets really hot. The square bill really shines with that. And you really need situations where you have water visibility sort of between that 8 inches and 1.5 feet for this to work good. Fishing it on 17 to 20 pound test Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon, and again the same launcher rod, just looking for those shallow targets. So anyway guys, really pick your poison. You can get the deep cranks, you can get the shallow cranks, both really effective all summer long. So see y'all next time.
Okay guys, so on a crankbait in the summer is one of my favorite ways to catch bass. And as I was early into this fishing hobby, this fishing adventure, man, I would live and die by the crankbait in the summer. I would never put it down at days. I would throw it all day. Now as I've gotten older and more experienced, I know when to put it down. But I'm going to share with you guys some tips on shallow cranking to that mid-depth cranking in the summer. You just heard Matt and Randy both talk about some tips on deep cranking. And guys, I love catching them on deep crankbaits. People that know me, that's probably my #1 way I would prefer out of all the 3 depths of cranking. But I've already talked about catching them deep on crankbaits in 2 other videos. I'm going to put those on end screens after my segment, so go check them out if you want to hear me talk about deep cranking. Another thing, guys, don't forget about our Matt breakdowns at fishthemoment.com. Both Matt and Randy have breakdowns for the summer, for the fall, for any types of the year on different bodies of water. Go check them out to help support them and support our channel and Fish the Moment. Now let's get into the shallow cranking. Guys, I'm going to talk about that 7 to 10 foot cranking range first, that 6 to 10. I'm going to share with you guys a little crankbait that I like. I actually have it tied on right now for a fishing trip I'm going to do in a couple days. So this right here is the Spro Little John MD50. As you see, it's a little smaller crankbait. It's a flat side crankbait, which as I was growing up into fishing, I always got told to throw flat side crankbaits in the winter. But then I realized they eat this thing really good in the summer, especially when that water gets hot. So I'm going to be fishing a river in a fishing trip in 2 days. I'm taking some high school kids, and when I'm fishing them river systems, I'm looking for them points. I'm looking for them ditches, and I really like these flatter style crankbaits. Now, some of these points and ditches will have hard spots. I'm looking for hard spots. I want to drag drag and try to get this on the hard spot and keep it on contact with the bottom. I like this smaller one right here, as you see, to throw first. Now I also have a bigger one that I'm going to share with you as well. Now that is the Little John MD XL. So this one's a little bigger, as you see. This one's on right here. Okay, as you see, this one is a little bigger. So there are going to be some times where the fish are keying in on bigger bait fish. Where I'm fishing out in a couple days, there's more smaller bait fish. I'm going to try to target them smaller bait fish first. But if you like a bigger style crankbait, they have this right here. It goes in that 7-9 foot depth range, and once again, I'm looking at points, ditches. There might be some wood in the area, and guys, especially on lakes, your river systems, if there's some standing timber or some stumps, they will relate to the wood. As another crankbait, if I'm fishing shallower in the kind of them river systems, okay, I'm gonna be looking for a square bill. But I'm gonna talk about a little kind of a different square bill. This is the Spro Hunter SB65. One thing I like about it is it has a little bit different sound, okay? It's an erratic sound, all right? It's a loud sound, but it's that kind of that knock, knock, knock sound. So it's a little different than my square bills I have in the box. I just ordered a couple of these, giving these a shot. But once again, with the square bill, I'm looking for your points, ditches. I'm looking for wood, if there's stumps in the area, if I'm fishing flats. And now, one thing I'm about to share, okay, guys, and this is if you stayed in tune, you're about to hear some of the juice on the summer cranking, okay? With both these 7 to 9 foot diving crankbaits and these shallower ones. Let's talk about fishing brush piles in the summer. And I'm not talking about fishing the deep brush piles. I'm talking about brush piles in that 5 to 8, 10 foot range. Shallower brush piles, okay? One thing about it, now if you have live scope, this makes it easier, okay? If you do not have live scope, that's okay, because I fished I don't know how many years before I had forward-facing sonar, and we made this happen. So one thing I'll do, okay, and let's get this little guy out just because it's smaller and I like to hold it, all right? So one thing I want to do with these crankbaits, now once again, goes in that 7 to 9 depth range. Let's say I'm fishing a brush pile in 6 foot, okay? I'm going to line up with that brush pile. It's going to be straight ahead of me, right? I'm going to try to stay, anywhere from 70 to 100 feet away. The further away, the better. But depending on the wind, some of these smaller ones you can't cast as far, okay? And I really think if there's a lot of wind and it's windy, you can kind of get closer to them fish. Unless if you're fishing extremely clean water, it's okay to get a little bit closer. What I want to try to do is swim this to the side of the brush piles, okay? I'm not going to throw it and just bring it in the heart of it right away, okay? Because at times when you do bring it in the heart, you might get hung up. You're either going to get bit or you're going to get hung up. And most times you get hung up before you get bit. So I'm going to throw these down this side first. Once again, you can throw a little square bill down the side. Now, like I said, if you have forward-facing sonar, you can see it. But if you don't, line up to it. If you're still don't have all the electronics, if you don't have the mapping up front with your GPS, drop you a marker buoy up there. It is okay. I mean, them fish, like I said, it's fine, all right? So throw this down the side. Now, it's better, of course, if you deflect off the brush pile, okay? But I would probably start a little wider, because if they're really active and they're really curious and hungry, they're going to come out and eat it, okay? Now, one thing too with it, okay? You can jerk these like jerk baits. You can get it right there, pause it, and jerk, and give it a jerk, and it will move in the water, okay? Once again, I know a lot of people don't talk about this, but this is something I know I've done to catch fish as, once again, when I had just 2D sonar on the boat to now with live scope, okay? So with these, once again, these little medium diving crankbaits, if you're fishing them shallower brush piles, and remember, why we want to target them shallow brush piles this time of year is because there's a chance there's brim beds nearby. If you're really good with your electronics, you can find them brim beds, and there's some people that would like to place brush piles by the brim beds. So bass will use the brush piles to just kind of hang out in, have a little house. They'll go out and get their food when they want and come right back, okay? Now, once again, fish the sides of them, try to deflect it, and before you deflect it, if you're fishing wide, remember, reel that thing up and pause it, then start jerking it a little bit, okay? Some of you guys, like I said, have maybe never done it. If you have done it and had success, share it with me down in the comments below. Hey, I appreciate it. Go check out these 2 videos right here if you want to hear me talk about catching some fish on some deep crankbaits. Now, hey, we'll see you next time.